Thank you everyone for tuning in. I have Mark Gallagher, the man who spent the last 2-3 decades actually in Formula One business, and now I know that it's run as a business. And Mark is a keynote speaker. He speaks across the world to companies about performance, high performance culture in companies, because Formula One is all about that, performance, and split second can change everything, and same as in companies. And look, Mark, thank you for agreeing to do this interview for our exclusive B2B sales community, Sales Club in Lithuania. I very much appreciate your time. And the question I'm going to lead with is Mark, now you've encountered high performance teams obviously in your career with Formula One. Do you know what kind of culture does the organization need to have? Like what kind of a culture does a sales team maybe need to have those results, to have that positive experience?
Well, what I've really noticed is that in high performance teams, everyone pulls in the same direction.
Okay.
So everyone agrees what is the strategy, and they stick to it, and that means there is a common alignment, so a common view of where they're going, and also very commonly they will all understand completely what is the objective. So if there is any doubt about the objectives of the business, there's going to be confusion. So you see this great kind of one team mentality. And then in terms of the behaviors of people, what you notice is that people take responsibility for what they're doing. So there's a real responsibility culture.
Okay.
People take accountability for their actions. If they make an action or they make a decision, they understand that they are accountable for that. And there's also an interesting behavior where high-performing teams realize that they're not perfect. So every day they analyze their failures.
So they're not afraid to put their hand up and say we had a major...
So, yeah, they have a major issue or even a minor issue, and I think what's interesting is, I can remember myself, especially when you're younger, you're kind of confident and your ego gets in the way.
Yeah.
And actually you realize later on that it's much more of a strength if you go and say, I need some help. I'm struggling with this project, or I need some support, or I made a mistake, because we all want to be on a trajectory of continuous improvement. So within high-performing teams, you see this day after day after day, a focus on how we can improve. And that becomes a one-team culture of improvement. And it's really my big takeaway from Formula One is we have teams of 1,000 people, and we need 1,000 people to come to work every day fully motivated.
Fully engaged.
Fully engaged. So it's about individual responsibility, and it's about a collective mindset. We're part of a team and we're going to win.
And one of the first things you mentioned is that you have to have a common goal, a common vision towards where everybody is. But I know you work with companies, and when you come into a company, to a business company, that's not always the case. Is there anything, what's the key to that alignment? I mean, how do you get people from unaligned, and not be so engaged into making them really aligned?
So one of the most shocking things about being a public speaker is when I go inside a company and I speak to 100, 200, 300 people. We have a great session. And then afterwards at coffee, someone comes to me and they say, well, of course, the bosses don't realize that we're actually really having problems because we don't have enough resource, or we don't have enough support, or we don't. And even though I'm a stranger, I'm an external person, they're telling me they don't have the one team culture because there's a disconnect between the leadership and the workforce.
So is that the key, to connect them? No.
And I can promise you, I could tell you many quite shocking examples, and I'm talking about very successful businesses, in some cases multi-billion-dollar businesses. So from outside they look amazingly successful. Actually you go inside them and you find out there's all these disconnects. And that's why there's so much potential in businesses which does not get realized. because people give up. People say, oh, the company's not listening, or okay, we know what the strategy is, but I don't really believe it's possible to achieve this. All of those are the wrong mentalities. So the high performance environment that I'm talking about is where people are honest with each other, very transparent. These are the good things we're doing, but these are also the bad things. So we have good things, we have bad things. So we celebrate our successes, but we are also realistic about our failures. And it requires enormous confidence in each other. You know, if I'm going to tell you, if you're my boss and I'm going to tell you that I made a mistake,
Yeah, that could be a risk you're taking.
I need to trust that you're going to say, okay, what can we do to help you? The alternative is you could say, right,
You're sacked.
you're sacked. So that's a blame culture. So a blame culture is precisely the opposite.
Well, that's what I see in sales. I mean, salespeople are afraid to raise their issues, the things to their management. And do you find, like, if you have a sales team, say a sales and marketing team in a company, does that accountability, you said that's one of the factors, is that key also to making sure people start getting better results? Does it trace back to the individual actually? Is that the way to do it?
I think it's very important that, I mean, we performance manage everyone.
Everyone, the 1,000 people.
All 1,000 people. You know, we need a driver to drive, but we need an engineer to engineer. We need a mechanic to be a mechanic. Everyone has to play their part. Coming back to your question, when I was 21 years of age and I started working in Formula One, I worked in the sales department, and I wasn't very good. And the reason I wasn't very good was I was afraid of rejection from customers. So I didn't want a customer to say no, so I just kept talking. So my sales pipeline looked amazing.
But they were not. That wasn't a real sales pipeline.
I wasn't converting anything.
It's just the same deals there.
I had a huge group of amazing, friendly contacts.
Yeah.
And I talked to them all the time.
But no business.
But I wasn't generating any business. It wasn't my fault. I hadn't been given the training or the support. And it wasn't until I realized that, and then I went and I said to my boss, look, I've been talking to these people for 3 months, but I haven't converted a deal. And then he said, but you need to close the deal. So we then but they'd never trained me. So how can I do the job? So early on in life, I realized in my career that people need to be supported. Great leaders of high-performing teams are principally coaching.
Okay.
You know, they're helping and they're supporting and they're coaching.
So that was what was missing? I mean, you were not coached how
I wasn't being coached.
Close the sale, actually.
You know, my boss walked into the office and said, this is your sales target. Come back and see me on Friday. I mean, I didn't know how to get there. I need support to do that. So again, in a Formula One team today, if we're going to say to 1,000 people, right, our objective is to win the World Championship, we need to know that the 1,000 people really believe in that target, that it is realistic, that we are going to provide the resource and the support and the training and give them the ingredients to be successful. And again, going back to a point we discussed earlier on, it is all about that connectivity, people talking to each other and having authentic conversations, being truthful. Where are we at? Where are we going? What do we need to get there?
Okay, and you must have learned that very well, because I know your career in sales and business development in Formula One is impressive. And I've heard your presentation, and you talked about having your sponsors taken away from you, because we had the .com bubble and it's gone. And then I think it was the cigarettes bubble, but they were gone because you couldn't advertise cigarettes anymore.
Our business model broke.
Business model broke, and then was the financial services, and then the crisis. How did you keep on, what did you do to find new accounts, find new sponsors? And you're losing, what was it, 60, 70% of your
70%
revenue?
of our revenue.
I mean, what did you do? I mean, a lot of people would just throw in the towel. I mean, why didn't you?
Well, it's an interesting recollection because I remember sitting in my office one day looking at my staff through the window and wondering what job everyone would be doing in 2 years' time because I couldn't see a solution. Our business model was broken, our customers were going,
Okay.
we couldn't find new customers, so it felt like a crisis. And the answer to that problem came from taking a step back and evaluating what is the value that we are selling? What are we selling? And I think for salespeople and I think for business leaders, very often the problem arises because you're so close
To the product.
You're so close to the product and so close to the problem,
You don't see the.
you never
what
see
you're
the
selling.
big picture. You lose sight of what you're selling. And I mean, before we recorded this interview, you and I had a good conversation about examples where people think differently and they look at a different value proposition. I think the story I told you was the famous quote by Henry Ford.
Yes.
If someone asked him, if he asked the customers, what do you want? They would have said faster horses, but he sold them a car.
So you have to take a step back to see the full picture.
And you know, if you look at, I mean, I'm a big fan in the automotive industry, I'm a big fan of what Elon Musk is doing,
Okay.
because here's a guy who has challenged everything. People are still telling him he's crazy,
Okay. But he's doing it.
but he's doing it, and he's selling a lot of cars, and he's changing the world in doing that. So I think, you know, there are lots of examples, especially now in 2019, of businesses like Uber and Airbnb, which are revolutionizing transportation or a service sector like hotel rooms, and they're doing something that didn't exist just a few years ago. So that's all about creating a new value because they're thinking about the customer.
And what they need. And then, of course, somewhere there is an individual selling to an individual and carrying that message, and then either you carry it across or you don't. And I know you've dealt with people who are really good at their jobs. I mean, when you're in Formula One, everybody pretty much has to be really good at what they do. I mean, like changing tires, 1.9 seconds.
1.9
the whole thing,
seconds,
so
yeah.
what's 36 operations?
When was the last time you got 4 new tires on your car?
Well, but I tell you, it didn't took 1.9 seconds.
No.
It took half, I don't know, 2 hours at least.
Yeah,
I
probably
mean,
next week. They probably booked
And that
you
was
next
like
week.
that wasn't 36 operation. That was less operation. So high performance people. Have you in your career noticed? Is there specific human traits or values that people have that make them, high performance? That make them, take it to the next level. Really, is there specifics?
Yeah, there really is. It's an incredible degree of focus on the job, and I mean almost to an obsessive level.
Okay.
It's the most important thing.
Okay.
So they have their private life, and then they have their business life. And in their business life, they are completely focused. So Michael Schumacher, who I talked about during my speech.
So is he engaged when he's doing his thing? Is he like completely engaged?
So a small story that I have sometimes told people is when Michael Schumacher was racing in Formula One, myself and other people, we noticed that the last car to leave the car park every night, the last car, 11 o'clock at night, was Michael's. So one day I said to one of the Ferrari management, why does Michael stay until 11 o'clock at night? All the other drivers are in the restaurant or a nightclub or having fun. He said, no, he has dinner with the engineers and then he spends a whole evening looking at data to see how he can improve tomorrow. And when Michael retired from Formula One, another driver was asked, what made Michael so successful? And this driver gave kind of quite a negative answer. He said, Michael Schumacher's quite boring. He only has his career and his family. And I thought to myself, that's why Michael won 7 world championships, and that's why the other driver didn't win any. You know, Michael was focused, and in his life, that obsession with success and achievement and getting the people around him, building the right team, that's what drove his success. And he did very much what, you know, if you take a footballer like David Beckham. So David Beckham was once asked why he was such a skilled footballer. He practiced every day from he was a child. You know, it's the 10,000 hours rule, you know, 10,000 hours.
Or more.
Or more. You know, you keep pushing. It's amazing how good you become at something when you just keep pushing at it. You get better.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we had Mark Gallagher here on an exclusive interview for Sales Club, the B2B sales community in Lithuania. Thank you very much, Mark.
Very much.
And we hope to see you again in Lithuania.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.